Imagine an elderly man walking under the weight of a promise that had taken years to fulfill. A father who received from God the most precious gift, and now, faced with an incomprehensible call, is asked to surrender what he loves most. This is not just the story of Abraham and Isaac. It is the story of each of us when faith leads us to places where the eyes see no way out. It is the altar of decision, where heart and obedience meet before the eternal. Today, we will dive together into the account of Isaac's sacrifice, not merely as an ancient tale, but as a living, pulsating journey that touches the soul and echoes in every breath of faith. Every detail of this biblical story carries the sound of a distant drum, the echo of a test measured not by time, but by trust. And if we look closely, we may see that the marks of Abraham are also etched in our own journeys. Throughout this video, we will explore 10 pivotal moments of this epic episode, where heaven and earth seem to meet in silence. Each step will be an invitation to reflection, to remembrance, and perhaps even to tears. And by the end of this journey, you'll be able to share with us in the comments the moments in your life when God asked for your trust in the impossible. Because this story is also yours. It was an ordinary morning, yet God's call did not arrive as routine. It came like a gentle thunder, a voice piercing the soul without harm, simply awakening it. Abraham, the patriarch, heard his name spoken by the Creator, and there was no hesitation in his reply. Here I am, a surrender immediate, before even knowing the command. Then the command came like an arrow to the heart. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. The promise now seemed to contradict the very promise itself. How many of us have heard God's words that we cannot comprehend? How many times have we felt that what he asks seems to defy the logic of the life we dreamed of? In that moment, faith is not a feeling, but obedience. Abraham moved forward, not because he understood, but because he trusted. And in that, there is a mirror for our own trials. But the beginning of this journey does not yet reveal the weight of the wood, nor the climb up the mountain. That will be the next step, the silent preparation for an impossible sacrifice. Abraham rose early. There was no delay, no excuses. Obedience was born in the silence of dawn, when the heart wrestles between love and faith. He prepared the donkey, gathered the wood, called 2 servants, and Isaac, the son of promise. Every gesture was an unspoken prayer, a hidden plea in calloused hands. There are no recorded tears, yet it is impossible not to imagine them. Abraham's silence speaks louder than 1,000 cries. It is the silence of one who trusts even without understanding. And us? How many times must we walk in silence, preparing the wood of our own renunciations, with no one knowing the battle we carry inside? With every step, every rope tied, Abraham revealed that true faith is proven not just in speaking, but in preparing. The altar begins to rise long before reaching the mountain. But the road was still long. And on this road, something mysterious awaited. The 3rd day of the journey, where hope and sacrifice would meet in a single gaze. 3 days of walking. 3 days in which Abraham's heart beat like a distant drum. Every step echoed the memory of the promise and the weight of the command. The 3rd day is more than a number. It is the symbolic time of waiting, of faith gestating, of the silence that precedes divine revelation. Lifting his eyes, Abraham saw the mountain of sacrifice in the distance. It was not merely a mountain of stone. It was the invisible altar where faith and obedience would be consumed. How many of us have had this 3rd day? That moment when, after long waits, the reality of our test finally appears before our eyes? The servants stayed behind. Only the Father and the Son would climb together, because there are sacrifices that cannot be shared, only lived intimately with God. And on the heart of that climb, Isaac's silence would turn into a question that still echoes across centuries and touches our own souls. Young Isaac carried the wood on his shoulders, unaware that he bore the weight of his own story. His steps were steady, yet his innocent heart stirred with unspoken questions. Midway up the climb, he broke the silence with words that would echo through generations. "My father, where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Ah, what a question! Not just from a curious child, but the echo of all humanity crying out for answers in the midst of the mystery of pain and sacrifice. And Abraham, with his voice choked by faith, replied, "God himself will provide the lamb." Words that are more than an answer. They are prophecy pointing to the cross. How many times do we also ask God, where is the way out? Where is the provision? Where is the relief for this trial? But the journey did not stop. Isaac's question opened the door to an even deeper silence, the hour when the altar would be raised and the decision sealed. With steady hands and a trembling heart, Abraham began to raise the altar. Stone upon stone, each one a silent witness to an impossible act. Isaac watched. Perhaps he did not fully understand, yet every gesture of his father revealed a faith that goes beyond words. A faith that builds even when it hurts. The altar was not just a pile of stones. It was the stage where eternity would touch time, where the invisible God would be revealed amid human obedience. And how many altars have we built in our own lives? Altars of renunciation, surrender, and trust in the midst of the inexplicable? There were no songs, no celebrations in that moment. Only silence. The same silence that often surrounds us when we obey God in secret. And upon that altar, the Son of Promise would be laid. But before the climax, the weight of surrender still had to be felt in the most difficult act of all, binding Isaac. The moment had come. Abraham took the ropes in his hands. Each knot felt like a wound opened in his soul, yet it was also a testimony of trust. Isaac, the beloved son, allowed himself to be bound. There is no record of resistance, only silence. A silence that speaks of a child's trust in the heart of his father. This scene cuts deep. The patriarch binding with ropes what he loves most, as if saying to God, "Nothing is mine. All is yours." How many times must we also bind our dreams, our plans, and lay them on the altar, even without understanding why? The weight of the ropes reminds us that true faith is not only letting go of what we do not want, but giving up what we cherish most. And with Isaac bound upon the altar, only one last gesture remained. The knife gleaming in the sun, poised to pierce the heart, preparing the soul for the most feared climax. The darkest moment rose before their eyes. Abraham lifted the knife, and the steel gleamed in the sun like a silent thunder about to strike. His heart raced, yet his hand did not tremble. For the faith that sustained him was not his own. It was the promise God had planted deep within his soul. Time seemed to stop. Heaven and earth watched the blade, a symbol of the most radical obedience a man had ever offered. How many times have we felt this way, with the knife hovering over what we love, not knowing if God would intervene at the last moment? It is at this point that faith ceases to be a concept and becomes blood, sweat, and tears. The altar becomes a battlefield where obedience triumphs over fear. But before the knife could descend, a voice cut through the silence, a voice that interrupted tragedy and revealed the heart of God. At the very moment the knife was about to fall, the impossible happened. A voice echoed from heaven, clear as lightning and gentle as a breeze. "Abraham, Abraham!" The double call that stopped the inevitable. Once again, the patriarch responded with the same words, "Here I am." The divine command was firm yet merciful. Do not lay a hand on the boy, and do not do anything to him. The test had reached its limit, and faith had reached its peak. This moment reminds us that God knows our hearts better than we know ourselves. He knows the extent of our endurance, and never abandons us at the pinnacle of our trials. How many of us have felt this voice from heaven, at the last instant, when all seemed lost, bringing hope back into our lives? But the mountain would not remain empty. Beside it, something unexpected would appear. God's provision, hidden in silence, waiting for the perfect time to be revealed. Abraham lifted his eyes, and there it was, a ram caught by its horns in the thicket. It was no coincidence. It was perfect provision at the exact right moment. The lamb took the place of the son. The altar was not left empty, but filled by the sacrifice that pointed to something far greater. There, the name of God was proclaimed, Jehovah-Jireh, the Lord will provide, a name that still echoes as a promise over all who trust. How many times in our own stories do we discover God's lamb appearing at the very moment we see no way out? This ram, caught in the bush, foreshadows the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ, who centuries later would offer himself in our place. But the story does not end with the lamb. For after provision comes the renewed promise, sealed by God himself with an eternal oath. With Isaac saved and the ram provided, God reaffirmed his promise to multiply Abraham's descendants like the stars of the sky. The mountain that once seemed a place of sorrow became a place of blessing. The impossible became testimony. Abraham's faith now stood as an example for all generations. How many times do our trials transform into testimonies, and our deserts into gardens when we obey, even without understanding? God's promise never fails. It is fulfilled at the perfect time, even when our eyes see only stones, climbs, and silence. Every step Abraham took on that mountain is reflected in our own lives, reminding us that faith is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. And so, the cycle completes itself, yet invites us to reflect on how our own stories can be transformed by obedience and trust. The story of Isaac's sacrifice is not just about stones, mountains, or ropes. It is about the human heart standing before the infinite, about faith rising even when logic falls. Every step of Abraham reminds us that obedience often comes with pain, fear, and silence, but it also brings revelation, provision, and new life. When we think of the provided lamb, we see that God knows our needs even before we ask, and he gives us exactly what we need at the right time. This ancient narrative still echoes today, inviting us to reflect. What mountains is God calling us to climb? What lambs will he provide in our lives? Share in the comments your moments of faith, your stories of trusting the impossible. Inspire others with your experience and see how God works in the lives of those who believe. If this video touched your heart, remember, God never fails. He is faithful, he provides, and he honors faith. Subscribe to the channel to continue walking with us. Share this message and keep your faith strong. God bless your life.